That's all a lie. I actually realized that I totally misspoke because I actually finished... No, never mind. I was right. Hi. I always feel like this is so dramatic, the reveal. Hi everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be my August reading rewind, and I had checked in with you guys, I feel like mid-month, or like while I was doing my ThrillerAthon TBR, and at that stage I had read 2 books, but thanks to the magic of ThrillerAthon, I actually wound up reading, technically, I want to say 8 books for the month, but if we're not going to be technical, I finished the 9th book the morning of September 1st. So I'm going to include it in this recap because I read the bulk of it in August. So anyway, long story short, I was traveling a lot of August and I just wasn't reading. But I had a week off before my new job, which happened to coincide with ThrillerAthon, and I motored through so many books. So I also did my first ever reading vlog, which thank you to everyone for being kind about it. It definitely took me a little bit of time to get like, you know, like my vlogging legs, but I had fun with it. It's definitely something I'm going to try and do again. I don't know when, I'm not going to commit to a date, but at some stage I'm going to give it a go, maybe like a weekend reading vlog. But I will link those down below if you haven't seen them or are curious about them, because I do give some insights on a lot of these books kind of as I was reading them, but I will give you some full-blown reviews now, all the thoughts, all the feels, and we will do that now. So because there's so many books and because I know I can ramble on like nobody's business, I am going to break this up into 2 parts, so let's do part 1. The first book that I read is Trust Me by Hank Phillippi Ryan. And oddly enough, / crazily enough, this is the first Hank Phillippi Ryan book I have read. And she's been writing books for probably 15 years, I want to say, on top of a multi-decade career as a journalist and investigative reporter in Boston. So this is one of her standalones. She also has a series, and I actually got this in my goodie bag at Thriller Fest, which if you haven't seen that haul video, I'll link that for you down below. So that was something I went to here in New York in July, and I was so excited to get it because I've been itching to read one of her books, and I finally got one and had the perfect reason to do it. And I'm so happy I did because this was a really fun one. And this follows Mercer Hennessy, who is a journalist. And she basically, kind of like page 1, no spoilers as always, is dealing with the aftermath of her husband and daughter having been killed in a car crash probably like a year and a half ago, I would say. And understandably, she is still struggling to pick up the pieces from this. And a good friend of hers who she used to work with brings her this opportunity to ghostwrite a book. I don't know if it's ghostwriting, to write a book following this insane trial called Baby Boston that is just starting in Boston, about a mother who is on trial for the very brutal murder of her daughter. And Mercer is kind of like understandably a little bit hesitant because it hits very close to home, having lost her own daughter, but at the same time it's like $15,000 like up front, more money when the book gets published, and basically all she needs to do is follow the trial, write the book, because there's no doubt in anyone's mind that this woman is guilty of killing her daughter. And, you know, the book will be a bestseller, she'll make more money, it'll help get her back on her feet, it'll help get her back into her career, and it'll help her hopefully kind of cope with her losses. So she does it, and I don't want to give anything away, obviously, but this is very much, it's a bit of Casey Anthony to it, which Hank Phillippi Ryan does some major winks to and like notes it in the book. So there's sort of some rip from the headlines feelings from it. But Mercer and then this woman who was on trial sort of become unlikely alliances is how they place it, and or how they kind of quote it in here, and need each other is kind of what winds up happening. So sort of reluctantly wind up having to work together. And it becomes this case of like, what's true, what's not, who's lying, and sort of the line on the cover is there's 3 sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth. And one of the things that I love about this book cover, which Hank Phillippi Ryan had actually pointed out in the session I was in Thriller ThrillerAthon or Thriller Fest. Ugh, I'm gonna keep mixing those two things up. Is if you turn the book sideways, you see the word liar in the background, sort of like that shadowy thing. So I think that is the coolest thing ever. And what I will say about this book is it definitely had me guessing. I wasn't sure who to trust, which is the whole point. And what I found interesting and sort of what I like recognized at the end and having 20/20 hindsight is I felt very like off kilter through a lot of the book. I don't know if that's like the best way to say it. So the woman who is accused of killing her daughter, Ashlyn, she's very like frenetic in her talking and in her mannerisms and in her speech. And it's sort of this very kind of like jagged, sharp cut, doesn't always follow the same train of thought, doesn't always answer the questions. And what I realize is like you're supposed to, or what I think is you're supposed to be kind of a little bit off balance when you're listening to her and when you're reading her part of the story, because you're not quite sure where she's coming from or if she's spinning lies or if she's telling the truth. And is she grieving? Is she scared? Is she sort of just this relentless killer and kind of all in? And by the end, I realized like that was, I think, a very intentional, clever device to keep you a little bit unbalanced throughout. So I very much enjoyed it. There were some great lines in it. I did some dog earing, of course. And this is not a spoiler in any way, but there was this one quote in it, this line in it that I loved, and I wanted to read it because I just thought it was great. And she says, "There are truths, though. We have one life. We do the best we can. We love, we laugh, we grieve, we breathe. Some doors close, some doors open. We find forgotten rooms." I just thought that was so like beautiful. Do you ever say beautiful in a mystery thriller? But I will. So super happy to have this, super happy I read it, and I am excited to dive into The Murder List next, which is her latest release. The next book I have is a nonfiction writing book, and it's called On Writing by Stephen King. And if you follow me, then I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in my June wrap-up. So let's go back 100 years. This is my original book that I got probably not long after it came out. So to keep in the Boston theme for other Bostonians out there, the bookmark from Brookline Booksmith is still in the book because that's where I bought it. And on the bottom of it, it has a Best of Boston 2001. So I'm gonna guess I bought this book 2001, 2002. So it looks this way for a reason, and it's because it has been around for a long time. It has moved to a lot of places with me. I've read it a bunch of times, and it is very well loved. And it is a book that I obviously continue to go back to when I'm looking for some inspiration, when I'm just looking to kind of like dip into a little nonfiction that I can come in and out of. And I had signed up a long time ago for the audiobook of this. It came through while I was on vacation in June, and I only was able to listen to like half of it because I couldn't renew it and I was on vacation, so I wasn't like hunkered down listening to an audiobook. So I came home, I read a little bit of it, I kind of put it aside again, and then the book came back to me in the audiobook because obviously as soon as it expired the first time around, I put myself back on the waiting list. So I finally finished it. And ironically enough, it came back to me again when I was on vacation, but this time I like committed to it and finished it. And it's just a great book for writers. So I would say this is super writer-centric, unless you're a big Stephen King fan and you're just curious about kind of his background and his writing process. It's a lot of his personal history in here too, and sort of how it's influenced his writing. This is definitely kind of like audience specific, but it's very no nonsense. He does the narration on the audiobook himself, which I find just wonderful because I just love hearing sort of books read the way the authors intended it, so to speak. And, his success story is a lot of like blood, sweat, and tears. He worked very hard for a very long time. He made very little money on his first books, and he is just such an epic success now. This book was written, I think, not long after that horrible accident where he was hit by a car when he was walking on a road in Maine. And, there was this fear that he might not survive. How injured would he be sort of long term? So he also has a good retrospective about that incident and how it affected him. But it's just a very interesting book, and it's also packed with so many genius nuggets of inspiration, of just sort of like things that will, I think, resonate with writers and maybe creatives in general, but it really is writer specific. But sort of in like those dark nights of the soul moments, in those moments of success, in those moments of ideas, of, you know, wanting to quit, wanting to throw in the towel. He talks very openly about his drinking, how that affected him. He talks so wonderfully about his wife, who was such a support to him throughout. Talks about his kids, just his family, everything. So it's a very interesting book, again, if you're a Stephen King fan. But it's just, I could read so many quotes. I'm obviously looking down at them. I have dog-eared this book so many times. I have underlined things in this book so many times in different color ink from different times I've read it. But it's just such a great book. I'm so happy I read it again. I just opened to one of my favorite quotes, and it is, "Books are uniquely portable magic." He's great. And the crazy thing is I've never actually read a book that he's written, but I love his book about writing books. So the next group of books I'm going to talk about are the books that I had for ThrillerAthon. And all in, I will be totally transparent. I did finish 2 of the books one day after ThrillerAthon ended, but in all fairness to myself, I started my new job on the last day of ThrillerAthon. So if that inconvenient thing hadn't happened, I would have finished them both on the Monday. But because I'm like hyper competitive, I did, this is like my amateur box here, I did 8 of the 9 challenges, which makes me super happy, even though technically 2 of them happened on the Tuesday, but still. I did oldest thriller on my TBR, an author I've read before, a thriller with a trope I love, the host's favorite thriller, my most anticipated, the newest on my TBR, a new to me thriller, and the shortest thriller. So the only one I didn't get to in time for ThrillerAthon is the creepiest cover, but I did actually read it this month. So let's just jump into the books. The first book I read/listened to is 13 Minutes by Sarah Pinborough. And this is the last time I'm going to say this in case anybody missed it. But when I did my ThrillerAthon TBR, I counted this as an author I had read before because I said I read The Wife Between Us. That's Sarah Pekkanen. This is Sarah Pinborough. One more time, I'm sorry. But she was a new to me author. This was a fun book. And this is kind of a YA mystery thriller. It's called like Mean Girls on Crack, and it is about this girl, Natasha, who is the queen bee of the cool kid group in high school, and she basically is dragged out of a lake in the opening pages of the book. She had been dead for 13 minutes, and she doesn't know how she wound up there, who put her there, kind of who's after her, and this book is about her trying to figure out what all happened that night. And she is kind of a little suspect of her 2 best female friends. She's not quite sure who she can trust. She's not quite sure who's telling her the truth about things. Her memory is a little messed up. And for whatever reason, when she wakes up in the hospital, she finds herself sort of longing for her old best friend when life was easier back in junior high and everybody was friends. But Natasha kind of outed her from the group. And now she turns to this friend for help to figure out what happened to her that night. And her name is Becca. Sorry, I talked about this in the vlog. Some of these names got confusing to me because there's a Hannah and a Haley, and one was sort of in the cool group and one was not, and I kept mixing them up in the audiobook when all 5 of them were in a room together. But Becca kind of, she's got her own life. She's got her boyfriend. She's cool. Like, she doesn't really miss Natasha, but she kind of misses being friends with Natasha and winds up deciding to help her. So again, the story is basically trying to figure out what happened that night. And I very much enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that it felt, despite the fact that I haven't been in high school in a really long time, it felt like a very authentic depiction of high school with everything that kids do from drinking and parties and sex and the mean girl bullying aspect of it, and with the social media influence here, sort of how they rely on texting and how people communicate and the things people do and the cover-ups and the secrets and sort of stories that are spun and just sort of how people treat each other like crap. And then sort of high school relationships and the complications of that. And then their parents are in this, and sort of how the parents can helicopter them or support them or worry about them and all of these things. So it felt like a very to me, realistic high school experience. And I liked the twists and turns in the book. Like I thought it was well done. I liked the voices in it. I liked, some of it's told in text messages. I'm looking back down at the book. Some of it's told kind of in transcript, between Natasha and her therapist. Some of it's sort of like a diary entry. So there's a lot of different ways the story is told, which I also found to be very interesting. So you get different people's voices, which I thought was a very clever way to get different voices without just simply doing alternating chapters from alternating perspectives. So all in, I would say if you are a mystery thriller fan, if you're a YA fan, if you are looking for something new, it was a quick read. It was, I listened to a lot of it on audiobook from Hoopla. It was a quick listen. I really enjoyed it. It was just fun, good times, a little bit of messed upness, and I very much enjoyed the ending. The next book I read is Girls Like Us by Christina Alger. And this is another book that I got at Thriller Fest. And it was a book that I was so excited to read. I had my eye on it. So when I saw it, I was so excited to get it. And I had almost bought The Banker's Wife, which was her previous book, a few times. But I kind of was like, I've got a lot to read already. And every time I was going to buy it, I was in a bookstore, and honestly, I was being like a little bit cheap because I didn't want to pay full price for it. But fair warning, it is in my cart at Amazon, so I have my eye on it. It's going to happen at some point. I'm just trying to make a commitment to myself, sidebar, to chip away at books I own in September before I pick up new books. Not counting The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, but I already bought it, so it's fine. But anyway, this is police FBI procedural kind of a book, and has tropes I love, like returning to home when you don't want to because you have left for good reason, and sort of a past present mystery type of a thing going on with it. So this focuses on Nell Flynn, and she is an FBI agent who is on a leave of absence from the FBI because she was injured in the line of duty. So she's recovering from a gunshot wound in her shoulder, which is why I'm doing that. And she has to come home sort of timing-wise, coincidentally, not so great. Her father, Marty, was killed in a motorcycle accident. He was riding his motorcycle one night and crashed. So her dad is a former police officer. He was a police officer at the time of his death. He's just dead now, which is why I said former. But anyway, the book opens with her on a boat scattering his ashes with some of the men that he was on the force with and men that she has known her entire life and grown up with. The sad part of the story, and one of the reasons why Nell has not been home in 10 years, is when she was a child, like 7 years old, her mom was murdered on a weekend when Nell and her dad were away camping, and they found the guy and he's in jail, but obviously recovering from something like that is not easy, and it obviously also put some strain on her relationship with her dad. And there was a theory that her father might have been involved in her mom's murder, but Nell was his alibi, having been, out camping with him. So we come to the present day. She's back at home. She's kind of dealing with his papers and his will and his house, and kind of needs to close things up and sort of just close this chapter in her life. And the next morning while she's home, her dad's current partner, this guy named Lee, who is actually someone she went to high school with, comes to her because a body of a young woman has been found buried on the beach. And she was sort of buried and murdered in the same style as a young woman that they found a year earlier, which was a case that still has not been solved and was a case that her dad was working on. So Lee turns to Nell, not just because he is her dad's partner, but also he's hoping to kind of leverage Nell's FBI expertise and maybe some of her connections. So Nell does it because that's just who she is. And she is smart and stubborn and driven and won't take no for an answer, and is like a dog with a bone. She's going to chase things down and she's going to figure out what happened. And this is sort of her last, kind of for the memory of her dad, she's doing this. And what winds up happening, this is front jacket kind of stuff, is as she starts to go down the path of this investigation, she realizes the most likely suspect for these murders is her father. And now she starts to question the motives of his partners and his friends that he worked with on the police force and what they would do to cover this up. And then, of course, she also starts to question what happened all those years ago with her mom. So it was really good. It was really, really good. And I will say, this is a quick read. It is very police investigative heavy. So if that's not your thing, you might not like it. But at the same time, I think Nell is just such a good character that I would hope that people would give it a shot, even if it's not totally your thing, because it is a quick read and it's a quick story. And this investigation takes place over the course of a couple of days. And it's, you know, secrets come out and things are revealed and she starts chasing things down, and there are some good twists and there are some good turns. And there was a moment that I wanted to like put the book down and email Christine Alger and be like, what did you just do? But it needed to be done because things need to be done to serve a story, even if it doesn't make me as the reader happy all the time. But I thought it was really well done. And I also thought there was a great cast of surrounding characters in this book. I love Nell and Lee. I loved sort of her FBI web network that she reaches out to. And there is like a medical examiner who I really liked. And I could definitely see, I could see this turning into a series. I mean, Nell's an FBI agent, so sort of, you know, it's endless. It's not like she's Jessica Fletcher and everybody's going to die in this small town in Suffolk County. But there's sort of like the rich Hamptons type people who we see. And then there's sort of kind of the darker side of town and like the poorer side of town. It gets into a lot of different sort of some social issues. I don't want to give anything away because I don't want you guys to have any spoilers in it. But I thought it was really well done. So first book I'm reading by her. Not her first time out, but I enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the characters. Again, I really love Nell. So I was very happy with this one. I wound up giving it 4 stars, I want to say, on Goodreads. So I would say solid book, solid mystery. Very well done, very good read. And I am happy that I read it. So that does it for part 1 of what I read in August, and stay tuned for part 2 to find out the rest of my mysterious list. But I had a really good reading month. Having started off super slow, I'm glad I was able to pick up the pace and finish so many books, but you're just gonna have to tune back in to hear about all of those. But yeah, let me know what you guys read. Let me know if you've read any of these books, thoughts, comments, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys in part 2. So thank you so much for watching today and hanging out. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys soon. Bye, everybody.